And that's exactly what happened. Ray's tour of duty took him throughout the Pacific Basin to ports in Asia and South America and islands in the middle of the sea. He earned his dolphins and received them during an elaborate initiation at Midway Island en route to Japan. Following his honorable discharge, Ray completed his studies at the University of Washington. Graduating with honors in finance and business administration, Ray then began his career in real estate development and construction in Washington, Oregon, California, and Wyoming, eventually heading to Washington, D.C., where he developed and built numerous projects over a 40-year period. Ray has always been a man of the sea, and with his wife, Janet, who's here with us today in the audience, he has undertaken many a grand adventure. They've sailed across the Pacific to Bermuda, the Azores, and Portugal, through the Mediterranean, the length of America's east coast, around the Caribbean and Central America, through the Panama Canal, and along our west coast. As a member of the St. Francis Yacht Club, he has also sailed in races here, served as the club's Commodore, and been honored as the Sailor of the Year. Currently, he serves as a member of the our association's Board of Trustees, and he's on our executive committee. Ladies and gentlemen, we actually asked Ray to give us a perspective of what it was like as a 19-year-old serving on the Rattan, USS Rattan, and I think you're going to enjoy what you hear. Thank you. Mr. Ray Latta.
Encourage all of us to protect our country. It is Memorial Day. We highly honor our veterans. My speech is from the perspective of a 19-year-old in 1955 wanted to see the world and joined the U.S. Navy during peacetime. So at 19, I joined the Navy. I had 1 year of college at University of Washington in Seattle and was eager to go out on my own and see the world. I did boot camp in San Diego and ended up at Mare Island on a submarine named Rayton, SS-270, a Dato-class submarine. Like Pampanito, Pampanito's a Balboa class, but they're very similar type boats. They were built at the same time in 1943, different yards. Pampanito's hull is a little thicker, it's almost an inch thick, where El Rayton was a half-inch thick. So it allowed Pampanito to go 100 feet deeper, to 400 feet. Operation depth. Now, the only problem with these boats is they could only go underwater for about 36 hours. And then you had to charge batteries. Compared to the nuclear boats, who literally can stay underwater for 20 years without refueling. Limited only by its food supply and the factor, see, my future son-in-law is going to be it was on a nuclear boat, and he tells me all the time how much better their boats were than the old diesels. So every 90 days or so, they go to port, restock food, and go out for another 90 days. The World War II subs used torpedoes with a target distance of 2 to 3 miles. The nuclear subs have torpedoes and nuclear missiles that can go over 3,000 miles. The difference is mind-boggling. I was excited when we left Mare Island in 1955 and went out under the Golden Gate Bridge and were in the ocean for the first time. And when the captain out past the Fairlawns, he said, "Dive, dive, dive." Rayton couldn't dive. It wouldn't sink. So back to Mare Island to adjust the ballast. Rayton's ballast was fixed and my adventure began. I was a quartermaster, which was very good duty on a submarine. My duties involved navigation, communication with flashing lights, Most importantly, my duty station was on the conning tower and the bridge, which allowed you to be outside in fresh air. These boats always traveled on the surface, unlike the nuclear boats. The top speed on the surface is about 20 knots. The nuclear boats make 30, 35 knots underwater. We went to San Diego and spent some time loading supplies, including torpedoes, then off to Hawaii, which was one of the first tests that we had. In Hawaii, they have this 100-foot high tank, and you go into this little tiny compartment, 5 people jammed in this little tiny compartment, and you bleed water in until it gets up over the hatch. Then you bleed air in to equalize the pressure at 100 feet. And without any kind of Munson lung or anything that used to use, you open the hatch, take a gulp of compressed air, step out, and float to the top. Always not allowing bubbles to pass, you never want to pass your bubbles. If that makes any sense. So, we then went to Midway Island, Tinian, and Chichijima. Chichijima was where George Bush was shot down during World War II and was rescued by a submarine. It was a fortified island with many caves and gun placements, and the harbor was strewn with sunken ships and planes. Then off to Yokosuka, Japan, and many other Japanese ports. At Sasebo, which is in southern Japan, we went into dry dock for a 2-month repair. And during all this time, we would practice with carrier groups as they'd come through, firing dummy torpedoes at ships. Then they would send out destroyer escorts or destroyers to try to find us and sink us, which they always did. They would drop percussion grenades, and we would, the radio would tell them if it was a hit or miss, and we probably got sunk 100 times during the 3 years. During the period in southern Japan, a typhoon came through, and we had several scientists on board to test the hull in extreme wave conditions. So we went on 20-minute legs every 15 degrees at 12 knots. You can imagine what it was like rolling 35 to 45 degrees in the troughs. We then submerged, which was very nice and quiet, and after 30 minutes surfaced in high seas, which is a problem because as you come up, you lose air out of the tank, bottom of the tank, and water fills it and you go back down. So it took several times before we could actually surface. We left Sasebo for Formosa. What is Formosa called today? Taiwan. Whenever we were in port, R&R was a priority. So we always went to shore with a torpedo man who had access to the torpedo juice, 175% alcohol. So we always had a pretty good time when we were on
This is so cool right here.
Upon returning from China, we departed South America and went to the Panama Canal.
Excuse me, I'm walking by.
Went from the Panama Canal to Ecuador, where we were initiated from a polywog to a shellback. When you cross the equator, there was a ceremony. And we had the deck. The deck was all filled full of torpedo men with greasy bellies and hair. And we had to kiss the belly and then go through a garbage chute. I mean, this was incredible. That's what they did back in those days. In Ecuador, the first port was Guayaquil, Ecuador. And we transited up to 36 miles up the river to get to Guayaquil. The charts were not trusted, so I was relegated to throw a lead line off the bow and yelling back to the bridge, the depth in fathoms. And we proceeded up the river. The next port was Peru. There was an uprising in Peru, so the ship, it was canceled, and instead we were sent to the Galapagos Islands. The captain told us to fill both heads full of lettuce crates of beer, and we basically fished and swam for 10 days. Those are a few of the extraordinary adventures I had on a World War II submarine, which is different from the nuclear subs today. I came home, went back to college. I will always treasure those 3 years spent on the Rayton. I am thankful that it wasn't a U.S. war at that time, and my heart always was with those veterans, especially those submarine veterans who fought in our wars, who died for our freedom. Out of 75 Gato-class submarines, 20 never returned. As a total of 52 subs were lost during World War II. You heard the statistics. Almost 500 men never came back. So I thank you very much, and I enjoyed giving you a presentation.
Thank you, Ray. Absolutely wonderful. Everything I would expect of you.
Thank you, Ray. Our second speaker today